Welcome to Hollywood and Beyond podcast with Cincinnati host Stephen Brittingham. Experience meaningful and in-depth interviews with Hollywood's most interesting people. Enjoy the show.
Hi, Stephen. This is Emily Proctor calling you.
Hi, Stephen. It's Melissa Anderson calling.
Mr. Brittingham, this is Bill Duke. How are you, sir?
Stephen, this is Patrick Duffy.
Welcome to Hollywood and Beyond podcast. Your home for meaningful and in-depth interviews. For more guest and show news, please visit hollywoodbeyond.net.
You can receive all the latest episodes of Hollywood and Beyond with Stephen Brittingham delivered to your favorite listening device by subscribing to the show on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or whatever happens to be your favorite podcast listening service. Don't miss out. Tune in.
Hi, friends and listeners. This is host Stephen Brittingham. Do you happen to have a question or a comment for me? Or perhaps you feel that you might make an interesting guest here on Hollywood and Beyond. Whatever your reason may be, please feel free to contact me anytime directly at the show's official email address. That would be hollywoodandbeyondshow@gmail.com. That is hollywoodandbeyondshow@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you soon. The following scene is courteous of CBS and the Young and the Restless.
I deserve your scorn, your outrage, your hatred. All of that is justified, but I think deep down inside, you were as conflicted as I am. There is still something between us, Victoria. Let's get out of here. Leave your family, leave this town, and start over.
I am starting over. But not with you.
Okay. The only thing left to say is, I'm sorry.
Hello, friends and listeners. I am your host, actor and writer, Stephen Brittingham. Welcome to Hollywood and Beyond podcast. Your home for meaningful and in-depth interviews and conversations. My special guest today gave a memorable performance as Joshua Lewis for over a remarkable 28-year run on Guiding Light, resulting in 2 well-deserved Daytime Emmy nominations for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series. Earlier this year, Robert joined the Young and The Restless as businessman Ashland Locke, taking over the role from Richard Bergman. His time in Genoa City resulted in another impressive performance, which consisted of a mysterious past and devious schemes, a romance with Victoria Newman, squaring off with the powerful Victor Newman, a touching relationship with a young boy he thought of as his own, and a very intense exit, resulting in Ashland's demise. Robert will be sharing his thoughts on portraying Ashland, reflect on some Guiding Light memories, and also share his passion for performing on stage. It is an honor and pleasure to welcome him to the show. Robert Newman, welcome to Hollywood and Beyond.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you very much for having me.
So nice to have you here today. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to speak with you. I really appreciate it.
It's happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity as well.
Well, you are most welcome. Was so impressed with your performance on The Young and the Restless. I am here in Cincinnati. Where are you joining me from today, by chance?
I'm actually in right outside of Kalamazoo, Michigan, in Augusta, Michigan, at the Barn Theater. I am currently involved in the musical Rock of Ages here. I have been for a couple of weeks, playing the character of Dennis Dupree. And we're closing up the show on Sunday. I'll be heading home to Stamford, Connecticut, where I live, on Monday.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was the first thing I was going to ask you about. It looks like a super fun production, Rock of Ages, and that is great that you have another week to go, and I want to continue to wish you the best on that. You seem to have an association with the Barn Theater. Is that correct?
Yeah, it goes back decades, really. And this will get a little bit into my history for your listeners anyway. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I took my degree in theater in 1981 at Cal State University at Northridge in LA. And right after that, I came here to Michigan for a season of summer stock theater, working as an apprentice. And getting my equity card by the end of the season. And that was right here at the Barn Theater. So that is pretty much where I started my career. My first actual paycheck as an actor happened right here at the Barn Theater back in the summer of 1981. And since then, I've come back several times over the years, and now it's become almost a yearly journey for me, where I think of it as my theater home. It's a place I can come where I know everyone involved. I know the producer and his wife, Brendan and Penelope Bragazzi, very well, and I just can play a bunch of different kinds of roles here that I might not play elsewhere. And it's really been a great source for me to work on my craft and to try on different characters. It's just 41 years ago, now that I think about it, 41 years ago.
That is amazing. That is something else. Well, you may have actually answered a portion of this with your last few comments, but I would still like to ask, Robert, what do you love the most about performing in front of a live audience?
I do a little bit at they have a bar show after every performance, and I've been speaking in that bar show, and occasionally I just talk about my love of the craft. I talk about supporting theater, and one of the ways I've been talking about it recently has been this, that, having done this role on Young and The Restless, coming back to daytime for a short time, I've been thinking a lot about the difference between working on television and working on stage, and why I'm such a theater hound. I really am, through and through. It's where I was trained in the first place. And even though I spent 28 years playing Joshua Lewis on The Guiding Light on television, it's still theater is the place where I feel most at home. I really do. And I was thinking about why that might be and what the differences are. And I think the really fundamental difference for me with live theater is that we all gather together in that space. In this case, it's a theater that seats about 400 people. And by we all, I mean all of the actors, all of the technicians, all of the people on both sides of the equation, the backstage and on stage, but the audience as well. We all come together in this space to tell a story, basically, is what it is. And to tell a story in real time, right now. Not something that we shot 5 weeks ago or 6 months ago, but something right here and now. And everything that happens on that stage happens in real time. The things that go right and the things that go wrong all happen in real time, and we all deal with them together. The performers and the audience together deal with things. When we're doing something like Rock of Ages, like I'm doing right now, it's a very funny piece. It's a really fast-moving musical based on the music of the 1980s. And I feel like there's this unspoken agreement between us and the audience, right? We say a line in a certain way and they laugh. We sing a lyric in a certain way and they may cry. We do some like extraordinary moment. There's a moment when a character comes jumping onto my shoulder, and I lift him straight up in the air, like an airplane, and the audience just goes, "Wow, that's fantastic!" Kind of thing. That all happens right here and right now with all of us, and so the audience becomes, in a way, part of our performance. It's like breathing. We're breathing together. Again, that the line lands, the laughter happens, the moment happens, everything happens right then and there. And I think that that's what draws me so strongly to working on stage versus working on film or television. Of course, you have the crew there when you're shooting on the soap opera or whatever. You have your other actors there, but you don't really have that give and take that you have with the audience in real time, in the real moment.
Very nice. Well, I certainly hope that I can be fortunate enough to see you on the stage someday. I'm here in Cincinnati, Ohio, so it's not necessarily too far to drive up there to Michigan. Well, it'd be well worth it.
I do regional theater all around the country. You never know when I'm going to land in Cincinnati, Ohio. It may happen.
Well, I'll certainly keep an eye out for you. I would really enjoy that. Now, Robert, I'm wondering, since you've experienced so many stage productions over the decades, really, I'm sure you've also experienced those moments that don't go as planned or was in the script. Maybe the other actor skipped over pages of dialogue or just forgot the words, or someone falls. Have you experienced those mishaps along the way as well?
Well, of course I have. And honestly, so does every single stage performer out there. I think we all think, as consumers at least, the consumers think that whatever show they're seeing, whether it's Hamilton on Broadway or whether it's, some small show at some small theater in your local, in your town, things go right and things go wrong almost every single night on stage. Mm-hmm. They just do. But they have to be dealt with in real time. And frequently the audience isn't even aware of things that have gone wrong. I was doing a production a few years ago of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf opposite the great Kim Zimmer, who played Reva Shane on The Guiding Light for many years. We were at this very small theater in Nantucket, on the island of Nantucket. And I remember one night I was off stage, and suddenly I heard a cue line for me to re-enter, even though I knew I wasn't re-entering for several more minutes. And I bolted out there and bang, entered, pretty much right on the money. It turned out that somehow the actors on stage, Kim and one of the other two actors playing the younger, the young man and the young woman in the show, had sort of skipped over like 5 pages of dialogue, just magically. They just sort of jumped to something else, and suddenly this moment, because there's not a lot of time off stage for George and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Suddenly, this time I had off stage was truncated. And bang, I had to just be in there. We don't go back and fix those 5 pages. They're just gone. But the audience that night for that performance, they had no idea what was going on there for the most part. People don't really know the script that perfectly for a show like that. And, that thing happened. It was fixed. Nobody was the wiser. We went on with the show. I remember, too, I was doing a production of the play Picnic many, many years ago. I mean, decades ago. And there was a bit where I ran up to the front porch and hit those steps and vaulted over the picket fence and exited. And as I hit the steps disintegrated beneath my feet. They just broke into a million pieces. My body continued to move up and over the picket fence, but I landed... It looked to the audience, it looked like I landed dead center on my crotch on the picket fence, which didn't. No. But I landed kind of on my upper thigh. And later, the set designer had said to me that she was so thankful because in one of the earlier rehearsals, she was watching me do that, and the picket fence was picketed, like to a point, like a picket fence would be. Uh-huh. And she had decided at that time to round them all down in case something happened. So I was injured, but not halfway bad as injured as you think. And that actually stopped the show for a moment because I did fall and we had to take a minute to sort of get things restarted. It was right near the end of Act 1. we just dropped the curtain, and then when we began again, after intermission, we went ahead and took the intermission, then we started a few minutes later. So those kind of things happen all the time on stage. But like I said, they have to be dealt with in real time. On television, on the soap, you'd cut, you'd restart, you'd reshoot the scene just like that, and nobody would ever be the wiser. But there's something really extraordinary about those kinds of things too.
Well, I really enjoyed those answers. Thank you. And that's part of the fun, isn't it? Mishaps
it is.
And like your story that you shared.
Yeah.
That's part of the fun and excitement. I would like to ask, though, do you find yourself when you perform on stage, Robert, let's say like right now, but you have multiple nights, right? Multiple showings. Do you like to mostly keep it the same night after night when you find what it is that you want to do in a scene or in a moment? Or do you like to here and there try something else, tweak it, and try something different?
Well, to me, it's because it's alive. It's constantly moving and shifting. I think of myself as a very specific maker of choices when I work on stage or on television. I'm very specific about why I'm doing something. But the execution of that why can be done in so many different ways without changing the script and without changing the story. I'm pretty locked into word for word when I'm doing particularly a play, because a play is a finished published piece. For the most part, most of the plays that I do, they're finished, published pieces. And so I feel like that's the text. That's what we stay with. In a show like Rock of Ages, there's a bunch of ad-libbing that goes on in a show like Rock of Ages because it's pretty loose anyway. But, certainly for something like La Mancha or Sweeney Todd or something, I'm not going to be trying to outright Stephen Sondheim, or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not talking really about necessarily ad-libbing dialogue, but I do think that I'm an actor who believes that it's not as if there's a single way that this moment must be performed for it to be perfect. I believe that there are 10 different ways to play any given moment in any given play. Some of those choices are better than other choices, but there's a lot of ways to do things. So again, back to the whole live audience piece of this, the audience itself can cause a performance to shift and change in the way it's performed. And I think this is why theater actors who have done, the same play 8 times a week for, 5 years don't go completely insane doing that, because things do shift and change every single night. And sometimes that even includes the way you might play any given moment. I did a production of Gypsy opposite the great actress Tova Feldsha. And, she's one of the most gifted people I've ever been with on stage. And things were different, constantly throughout the run of the show. Things just shifted and moved. Nothing that, it's not like suddenly an actor comes out on the set, in a unitard riding a unicycle or something like that, but it's like things can move and shift, and that's the way they breathe and stay alive. For me, that's the way it works.
Well, Robert, before we discuss some of your television work, I thought this was a really nice moment for me to ask. Did you know at a young age that you wanted to become an actor, or why did you decide to become an actor when you look back?
No, there was nothing in my youth that pointed towards doing what I do now for a living. Other than this, I grew up in this pretty good-sized, fairly dysfunctional family, right? I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters, lots of divorce and remarriage in my family, a lot of, this one doesn't talk to that one, and this daughter doesn't talk to this mother, and, a lot of these really like crazy things in my family that went on. And so when I entered into college, I was actually on the road. I entered as a major in psychology because I was interested in human behavior, and particularly I was interested in the field of family dynamics. Because I had come from this large dysfunctional family, and I always have been on this quest to sort of understand in a better way how we ended up that way and why we were the way we were. So family dynamics, taking a degree in psychology, that made all the sense in the world to me. In my second year, I think, I think, I took an acting class just on a whim as an elective to just get through those 3 credits for that particular piece of my degree, And I just kind of, what the heck, why not? Let's see how this goes. And pretty quickly, I came to understand that I started looking at the works of Tennessee Williams and Eugene O'Neill and Edward Albee, and all of these guys were in fact writing about family dynamics, exactly the field that I was interested in. They were writing about the dysfunction of particularly of American families. And I just began to think to myself, well, this is really the same concept. This is the same idea. These are writers who are pursuing the questions I'm asking and trying to get answers to. Maybe I'll just kind of shift over in this way. I won't be sitting in an office opposite a patient working through issues, but there's ways I can portray characters on stage or television and help people to understand more about themselves. And that is when I think theater and or television are working at their very best. It's when we're sort of looking at a looking glass of ourselves, whether it's our families or our society or our relationships. We're seeing something about ourselves up there on that stage. And in the best of worlds, what's happening up there and the story that's being told is helping us to understand ourselves better. And that's really what drew me into becoming an actor. I was trained specifically really for the stage. I had no real interest in television or film. And then after I graduated, as I said, I spent a season of summer stock here in Michigan, playing several different roles. And then I went off to New York for what was supposed to be a week or so, and auditioned for a soap opera. And I'd never seen a soap opera in my life up to then. I'd never acted on camera in my life up to then. But evidently they liked what they saw, and they offered me a 3-year contract to move to New York City and start working on The Guiding Light, playing the character of Joshua Lewis. And I said, okay, let's do that.
And the rest is history, as they often say. Well, before I ask you a few questions about some memories of your time on The Guiding Light, and I'm looking forward to discussing your recent experience on The Young and The Restless, but I thought of an interesting question. It just popped in my head. I'm just wondering, did you ever have an actual conversation with the co-creator, co-producer, former head writer of Y&R, Bill Bell, years ago, perhaps at an awards ceremony, so to speak? I was very curious if you ever actually had a conversation with him in person.
I do not think Bill Bell and I ever met, no. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. I was just wondering if somehow you may have crossed paths. You know how that can be at award ceremonies and whatnot.
Well, I've met a lot of people over the years, and I hate to say that I probably forgot more people, that I probably had conversations with than I remember. I think I would have remembered something with Bill Bell. But no, we never really, they're in LA, we were in New York. We were existing in different worlds, and I crossed paths with people here and there. I knew Gloria Monty a little bit from General Hospital because I worked on General Hospital in 1986 for a few weeks, and I knew Jill Farron Phelps way before she became an executive producer on Guiding Light or Y&R. I met her and worked with her more specifically on Santa Barbara, the soap opera Santa Barbara, where I worked for a few weeks also around 1985, 86. But I don't recall any conversation with Bill Bell.
Well,
no.
I'm sure he would have been very impressed and pleased with your performance, if I may say so. He was quite the master storyteller. No doubt about that. Well, how did this opportunity, I gave a description during the opening segment, but how did the opportunity to portray Ashland Locke first develop for you?
Well, it was a whirlwind, really. I mean, this was we go back to January of this year, early January, right after the holidays, and in the evening, around 8 o'clock at night, my agent called on a weeknight and said, Y&R is interested in having you come out for. I think they initially talked about maybe 4 or 5 months. And we talked about that and whether or not I wanted to go out to LA for that time. My wife and I had a discussion about the fact that I travel for theater all the time. I've generally gone for 6 to 8 weeks when I do theater somewhere, but 3 or 4 months. And plus, having grown up in Los Angeles, I have family that's still out there, and I have good friends that I went to high school with and college. And we thought, well, okay, we can certainly have this conversation. And so he got back to them, and then they got back to him, and suddenly they wanted to offer me a 3-year contract to play this role. And I said, no, hold on, just stop. We got to put on the brakes right now. We were talking about a few months. Now we're talking about 3 years. This is not on my radar. I can't. I'm a new grandfather. I have a 2-year-old grandson.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I have a 4-month-old now grandson as well.
Oh, wow.
My son and daughter-in-law, Rocky Joseph, was born 4 months ago. I said, I live on the East Coast. My home is in Connecticut. Our daughter lives nearby. My mom lives nearby. I'm not going to move to Los Angeles magically for 3 years. No, I basically said no. And so that became a discussion about what time frame I might think about. And finally, just a long story short, many back and forths over the weekend, because that was a Friday night, by the way, now that I think about it. That was a Friday night. So over the weekend, we began this process of back and forth conversations through my agent with the executive producer there at Y&R, Tony. And finally, we settled on a structure that would be a year long, but more or less 2 6-month cycles, with the idea being that if they stick with their original plan was more or less to kill off the character after about another 5 or 6 months. But if they shift and move some things around, then maybe I would stay longer. That was the idea. And so that all happened between Friday night at 8 o'clock and Monday afternoon. And when we finally settled on it, on this structure, I had just a few days to get myself together because they wanted me there the following week. I had to fly on Saturday, and they wanted me to start working on that Wednesday of the next week. And they threw 5 episodes in 3 days at me. In the first 3 days I was on the show, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And it was fast and furious. It was they had to replace Richard. I think there's been plenty of press about this idea that Richard was something about COVID. That's not my department. I don't really talk about it. It doesn't matter to me. It's not I don't know the details of it. You'll have to interview Richard to talk about that. But
sure.
But they had to replace this actor. They were in a bind, and they asked me to come and play the role. And that's how it started.
Well, obviously you have decades of valuable television experience, and as we've discussed, theatrical experience. That's in your favor. It sounds to me like they were looking for a veteran actor because it was a very important role, and it's in the middle of a storyline, no less. It was really starting to gain some momentum as far as maybe his background goes right about the time you joined. Now, when you first arrived on day one on the set, did you get those old-fashioned butterflies just because it's the first day, or did it kind of feel like, hey, I've done this before, I'm ready to go?
It was. I don't ever get butterflies. I don't have any kind of version of stage fright or anything like that.
Okay.
I never have. I don't know why that is really. There's a couple of roles that I played that I felt more nervous about, just because they were so like when you're playing Sweeney Todd, that's a pretty big deal, you know. And I felt probably more concerned about doing it well. Well, I don't know. That makes it sound like I'm not concerned about doing things well, but you know, maybe something in that. Sure. I wouldn't say that I was in any way nervous. I was curious on the first couple of days at Y&R. I was, but I was so immersed in, you know, they had sent me these 5 episodes to shoot, like I said, in 3 days. They'd sent them to me, you know, a few days ahead of time. And so I was pretty well immersed in the mechanics of memorizing dialogue and creating this character on the spot. I had told them, I had a Zoom meeting with the head writer, Josh Griffin, and Tony, the executive producer, a few days before I left for Los Angeles, and we talked about what the history of the character to this point, which had only been a few months. I think that Richard had started that show maybe, I don't know, 6 months earlier or something like that. So there was quite a bit of history on this character. They had really laid quite a foundation for him in terms of background and also what actually happened with the character on the show. So I made a lot of notes there. I said to them at that point that I would prefer not to watch any of Richard's work. Meaning no disrespect to him. I just felt like if I were going to take this character, I had to create this character in my own way, in my own voice, with my own mind and my own body, you know, and it wouldn't be helpful to me to see another actor portray this character. They agreed to that completely. They were fine with that. I did ask them to send me the last 5 scripts that the character appeared in before my first appearance, because I wanted to get just a sort of a very recent background for that character. And then I just began my process. And the process for me was no different than the process I used on Guiding Light for all those years, really, in terms of how to work through dialogue and then work through the character and work through the moments of the scenes and figure out what I wanted to do here and questions I had. I had a list of questions a mile long pretty much every week. And I would email Josh and say, hey, I have a scene with this character that I don't know anything about. Tell me about their background. And he would, in an email, just basically give me the background of my relationship with whoever. And then I would build on how I wanted to portray the character and do that scene based on those notes. And then I would, of course, work with the directors and with the other actors, and we all would kind of come together and try to figure out how to move forward with this character. But it was a little abrupt to step into the middle of a character that had already been played. I'd never done that before. But Amelia, who played my wife, Victoria, was completely on board, and so was Eric and everybody else, and we just went forward. And it was actually those first couple of weeks were pretty lovely. I felt an enormous amount of support from everybody in those first couple of weeks.
I tell you what, one of the things that I enjoyed the most about your performance on Y&R was that you just had me guessing so much. You know, is he actually being honest? You know, with Victoria, let's say. Sure, I knew about his background, and of course that would be red flags, but the moments when you're professing love to Victoria, or that, you know, you're coming across as even a good guy, you know, I was really captivated because I still was never 100% sure that he was either way until, of course, you know, as we got near the conclusion of the storyline. And I just wanted to commend you on that because I think that was one of the fascinating elements to your performance is I felt like I was on a journey to find out the truth about Ashland.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. One of the things that Josh and I discussed at length was when is he being honest and when is he conning? You know, when is he conning somebody? And he told me a couple things that were very helpful. One was that there were two, before I came onto the show, there were two very influential events that had occurred in the life of Ashland Locke on camera. And one of them was the revelation that his son Harrison was not his real son, was not his biological son. And then finding out that, in addition to that his wife had had an affair with this other guy, and this other guy was Harrison's father, and that was something that really rocked Ashland's world, and really started shifting the way that he was thinking about life. And then the second thing that he was pretty adamant about, and we agreed on, was that even though the beginning of the relationship with Victoria was part of a con, to be honest, that the unexpected piece of that was that he fell in love with her, and that the love was real. I kept on really writing Josh on that question. Is the love he feels for Victoria a real thing, or is that just part of his way of doing business? I'm using air quotes here, being the ruthless businessman kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And we really both felt that the strongest way to play the character was that the love was real. And I play a lot of bad guys these days. I really do. And I always feel that I try not to really distinguish between good guys and bad guys when I'm playing the character, because, bad guys don't think of themselves as bad guys. They just don't. They think of themselves as, like, I think Ashland doesn't think of himself as a criminal or a con man. I think he saw himself as a very strong businessman who would do whatever it takes to achieve the goals of power and money. And I personally feel that those amongst us who have achieved that, multi-millionaire or billionaire status probably have done a lot of really questionable ethical and moral things in their journey to get there. That's just a belief that I have about people who amass that kind of money. There was probably a lot of dead bodies in the wake, not literally dead bodies, but right. A lot of people walked over, a lot of lives ruined, a lot of, advantage taken, and, when they can, and things like that. And to me, that's Ashland. And then also facing the Newmans, even though I don't know the history of Young and The Restless, because I've never watched the show, but I know enough about it to know that Victor had a very sordid history, and that all of them did, that Adam had a very sordid history, that they've all done these, questionable, terrible things in their past lives. So, part of my approach was, is Ashland really all that different than Victor? They're both kind of the same guy. But in this case, Ashland's the bad guy because he's, I guess, I don't know, conning the daughter, Victoria, or something. But, these were injured, and to me, they were interchangeable characters almost on that level, that they've all done, terrible things in their past to achieve either power or money, which is what a lot of people do in real life. So
it sounds like you're describing Victor Newman himself with some of the descriptions. And that was another element that fascinated me, was that the more that you were on the show, Robert, the more I realized that Ashland was really, in his own right, an equal to Victor Newman when it came to power and stepping over that line to achieve whatever it is they wanted to achieve. I have to tell you, Robert, I personally thought, as things heated up between your character and Victor's, it was fascinating and gripping television. It was really, really good. Even the moments when both of you were calm, you could just feel the tension. And I just wanted to say, I just thought that you did an excellent job with that. And what was it like working with Eric? And I remember the scene when you are in bars at the jail and he grabs you and pulls you forward. I mean, you got to see all sides of Eric, didn't you, during your time on Y&R?
Yeah, I mean, Eric, I have nothing but respect for Eric Braeden. I was a big fan of Rat Patrol when I was a kid, and Eric played a pretty significant role on that show. And
Yes.
I knew him from Combat. I kind of grew up watching Eric. And so to be working with him on Young and the Restless was really kind of a really out of body-ish kind of interesting experience. And but he's really I'll say this, he makes very definite choices, and he's sharp as he can be, even though he's getting up there in the years, but he is completely there. And he's a really great scene partner. I'll put it that way. And we had lengthy discussions about these two characters being sort of mirrored images of each other, and that's what makes them dislike each other so much, And yet, at the same time, and I remember saying this in one of the scenes we were doing, that where I was facing off against all the Newmans in the office. I remember saying, but Victor's the only one that he cares about. Victor's the only one that he's afraid of. Victor's the only one that he respects. All of those things came into play with Victor Newman.
Well, I'll tell you what, Robert, that rivalry between the two characters reminded me of the good old days when Jack Abbott and Victor Newman were in this. I'm sure you've heard about the feud. It's legendary. And let me just tell you, you talk about intensity. I mean, those two would really, really go at it. And it brought back some of that to me as a viewer, and I was really appreciative of that. So I thought I'd ask, Peter, of course, having worked on All My Children in New York, had you encountered Peter during your time when you were working on The Guiding Light?
Oh, yeah, Peter and I are friends. Peter
Gotcha.
and I have known each other for several decades. Peter and I bonded over, I think we bonded at some kind of an appearance, maybe a charity golf thing or something like that. And Peter and his wife and my wife Britt and I, the four of us have sat down together at and to break bread, that kind of thing. Peter and I also had several conversations when I was on the national board for SAG-AFTRA, for the Actors Union, when I was national vice president of that union for actors in the category of actors and performers. And when we were merging SAG and AFTRA together, Peter and I had conversations at that time about merging the two unions together. So Peter and I go pretty far back. And one of my favorite things about coming on the show, at least for a short time, was to be working in the same studio with Peter. We only had a couple of scenes together, if I recall, but he was one of the very first people to come to me. In fact, Peter called me after I was cast, before I even left Connecticut to head to L.A. Peter called me, and we talked for probably 30 minutes or so about the show. I had a few questions for him about the shooting style and the scheduling and things like that. But, he just welcomed me with open arms to that show. The other person I've known for a while is Christian LeBlanc. We've been, we just run into each other a lot. We joke around a lot, and we have a very friendly relationship with each other. And he and I chatted quite a bit during my time there as well.
Well, I'm sure they were both equally excited to have you on board, no doubt about that. And working with Amelia, from my viewpoint, I just think she is perfect as the modern day businesswoman. Like, she looks like she should be behind that desk. She's also, in my estimation, I think of her as a very bright and intelligent character, which I also find appealing. Obviously very beautiful, but she's just so skilled. And I thought that both of you had just very intriguing chemistry, both romantically, but also when Ashland was trying to convince her of something. I often wondered, what was she thinking? What were you thinking? It really played out well. What was your experience like working with Amelia?
Well, she had her work cut out for her there at the very beginning because she had really, she had been working a lot with Richard and developed whatever kind of working relationship she had with them. And then all of a sudden one day this other guy comes in to play the role. And and we had never met before that. We did speak on the phone briefly before my first day. We just chatted for, I don't know, 20 minutes or something on the phone about stuff, about life. Just to get to know each other a little bit. Mm-hmm. But she, I was throwing a lot of things at her, to her credit. I was throwing a lot of stuff at her that I think she was not experiencing with Richard in terms of just the way I was working towards portraying this character. And man, she just took it all. She just, she was right there and yes. Right on board with me. And she just, whatever adjustments she had to make to working with an entirely different human being today than she was working with a few days ago, she did it seamlessly, I think. And, I think we were really, one of the sad pieces to me of my shorter term there was that I think we were really, really hitting our stride right around the time, around the time I left the show. So, and I don't think there was really much of a future for those two characters. I don't know. That's all up to the fans to decide what they think might have happened between blah, blah, blah. But it seemed like a pretty broken relationship by the time, I left the show. But,
yes. But
I felt like Amelia and I, as scene partners, were really hitting our stride. I also enjoyed working a lot with Mark Grossman, who plays Adam.
Yes.
I liked the scenes that they were writing between these two characters. They were sort of bitchy, bantery, kind of snarky back and forths with each other. And I think both of us just really enjoyed that relationship. He was a lot of fun to work with.
Robert, I have a final question for you about your experience on Y&R. It really has to pertain with Harrison. As we get near the conclusion of the storyline, I remember your character saying, if I could just have, a final goodbye, if I could just have some time with him so that I can just say goodbye, I will leave town. And it truly seemed utmost sincere. I mean, I really believed like that's the last straw. You will leave. And you were doing such a good job showing this uncomfortable position of Ashland feeling deflated, like defeated almost. I remember many scenes, you almost seemed like you were quivering in your voice talking about Harrison. I just wanted to say I was very moved by that.
No, thank you.
And my question is this. It may be hypothetical, but you are the man behind Ashland. Let's say they would have said, okay, we'll give you a couple hours, half a day. Do you feel Ashland then would have left town and none of that other stuff would have happened? Or was it because they said no that it just kind of finally sent him over the edge?
I don't think it was the no that sent him over the edge. So to answer your question, yes, I actually think he would have left town. It doesn't mean he wouldn't have returned, down the road at some point. It doesn't mean he wouldn't have still continued to pursue a relationship with the young man he thinks. Listen, I thought of that whole thing in this way. If my son's name is Connor Newman. He was born in 1989. If when he was 5 years old, if somebody suddenly showed up in my world and said, Connor is not really your son, 4 or 5 years old, you've really bonded with that child. I have, as I said earlier, 2 grandsons now that are about 2 years old and about 4 months old. I'm completely and utterly bonded with those boys already. So 4 or 5 years into it, if somebody came to me when Connor was 4 years old and said, he's not your biological son, we're going to take him away, and then added, by the way, you're never going to see him again, it would have completely and utterly devastated me. Yes, and it would have completely devastated Connor, I think.
Yes.
They brought up that piece, how does this affect Harrison? Which I always thought was a really important piece to this. It's not just Ashland being punished and kept from Harrison. Harrison is having to deal with this whole thing of a man that he saw as his father for the first 4 years of his life, now suddenly, he can't see him anymore. That was a pretty big deal. So I think, but in this case, I think, yes, the quick answer to your question is, yeah, I think he would have said his goodbyes to Harrison. He would have kept his word, and he would have left town, and none of that would have happened. It wasn't the no that threw him over the edge. It was the setup in the park and being sent to jail for trying to see his son.
Yeah.
And more or less being arrested even in front of his son. Yes, Harrison was over there, but the cop was here, and the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
I think that those were the things that were putting him over the edge. I think being conned by Victoria twice put him over the edge. I think him accepting the fact that Victoria doesn't really love him back, I think put him over the edge. I think all of those things put him over the edge, and drove him to those final scenes at Victoria's house.
Well, if it makes you feel better, Robert, I was fooled too when Victoria, when she did that about face in the Big Apple. I was fooled as a viewer. It really took me a while to realize what was at play here. So I could just imagine how your character felt. And I just wanted to say again, I was very touched by those moments with Harrison. And I mean, thinking about it now almost makes me teary-eyed, because I know that was the most sincere part of Ashland that I saw, was the love for his son. And you described it perfectly, why that would be so significant. Well, thank you for sharing your Young and Restless memories, and congratulations on a memorable performance, one that I won't soon forget. I just had a couple questions about The Guiding Light, if you don't mind. And you mentioned your audition, but I'm wondering, was there anything else to your audition for Joshua that stands out, or was there a story there, or was it pretty standard, so to speak?
Well, it wasn't standard to me.
That was pretty big, wasn't it?
But no, I had, as I said, I just come off, 4 months in Michigan of summer stock. So I was drained, and I think I was way down in my weight and that kind of thing, because, I was living off of probably, hot dogs and whatever. But, I was just supposed to be in New York for a few days, and I had an agent who had offices both in LA and New York. And when I met some folks in the New York office, they were like, "Hey, we want to send you out on this." And at that time, Betty Ray, the great Betty Ray, was the casting director for Guiding Light. And, I went in and read with her for this character of Joshua, and she immediately ran me down the hall to Doug Marland's office, who was the head writer on the show, and said, "I want you to meet Robert, and we're going to read for you." And we read. And so they handed me this 6-page script and asked if I could come in tomorrow to screen test. And having never acted on television in my life, I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so I went home and memorized 6 pages of dialogue, and went in the next day. And there were about 6 of us there testing, including Scott Bryce, and who also tested for the part of Joshua Lewis on The Guiding Light. And out of that audition, they cast me as Josh, and they cast Scott as, I'm going to go with Craig Montgomery, I think was the name of his character, and As the World Turned, that he played for something like 25 years. And then they gave me 8 days to go home to Los Angeles, where I had not been in 4 months, basically pack up my apartment, get rid of my apartment, get rid of my car, put together a few boxes, and move to New York City and start work on a soap opera. And I did that. And I remember my first day there, I was staying temporarily in the Times Square Motor Hotel, right at 43rd Street and 8th Avenue, and that's right around the corner from the old 42nd Street, which was like all pimps and prostitutes and drug dealers.
Oh my!
And and I remember I got there early. I had a 7 a.m. call. I came in early, and I remember thinking to myself, God, wouldn't it be crazy if they were like, "Oh no, we didn't want that guy. We wanted that other guy." And I got there early, and the guard didn't have my name down, and he didn't know me. And the director, Bruce Berry, who became a lifelong friend of mine over the years, who had directed me in the screen test, came walking up and he said, "Robert, so good to see you. Welcome to the show." And he actually got me into the studio, and I shot those first few days, that first day, and I just saw those scenes not long ago. They're on YouTube somewhere, I think.
I'll have to check that out.
Episode, yeah. Yeah, meeting my sister Trish, played by Rebecca Holland, and working with a couple of other people. Yeah,
it seemed like back in the '80s, Robert. Even though I became a Y&R and B&B viewer, I was really a big fan of Bill Bell's style of production and writing. Anytime the guiding light was on, it seemed like you were on it. And even back then, I was impressed with your work.
Well, once Kim Zimmer came into the picture about a year and a half later, and Josh and Reva were born, then it was a great run. I always tell people it was a great way to raise my children. Soap opera work, you almost never work on weekends. You frequently have at least one, if not two weekdays off a week, because you're only in as many days of the week as you are in episodes. So if you're in 3 episodes this week, you're only in 3 days this week. So I got a lot more time with my children than most dads get. I say to fans who stop me on the street today, I say, thank you for helping put my children through college, because that's what they did. It was a really good run. I remember doing an interview with 60 Minutes when the show went off the air, and Mike Wallace asked me, not Mike Wallace, Morley Safer asked me, are you sad that the show's going off the air? Are you upset by it? And I said, I signed a 3-year contract 28 years ago. I don't think I have a lot to complain about. If only all of my gigs would work out as well as this one did.
You'd be all right, wouldn't you?
I would never be auditioning again. So it was a great run. It was a great way to raise my kids. It was a great way to spend my 3 decades of my life. And now I spend 99% of my time on stage and doing exactly what I love the most.
Well, I'm very happy for you, and I thought I would end by asking, was there a favorite storyline that you felt challenged you the most during your time on The Guiding Light?
Oh, well, those wouldn't be the same thing. The challenge me the most would not be the same as my favorite. It might even be my least favorite.
Ah, okay.
The cloning storyline, where Josh clones his dead wife and grows her from birth to 40 with a rapid growth formula in 6 weeks, and then that was a ridiculous fiasco storyline. Oddly enough, fans remember that. They remember it in a positive way now, but I remember we got tons of awful fan mail about that. And it was really difficult to do that story and make it work. But Kim and I often talk about what we call the Cat on a Hot Tin Roof storyline, which was way back when Reva married Josh's father, H.B. And in anger, Josh went screaming out in his car and got in a terrible accident and was paralyzed from the waist down, and then recuperated at H.B. and Reva's house. And we call that Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, with Big Daddy and Cat and Brick and, and working with the great Larry Gates as my father, and Jordan Clark playing my brother Billy. That was just a magical time at Guiding Light. It really was. It was really extraordinary people and great writing.
And if I could sneak one last question in, I should end this way. It makes sense. Working with Kim all of those years. What was that like? And what is it like to work with someone so closely for so long? I imagine the two of you would be very comfortable working together as time went by.
We were, the thing, Kim and I do hold a place in soap opera history. Any list of the top 5 or even the top 3 greatest couples in the history of daytime would include Josh and Reva. It just would.
I agree with you.
And there are not a lot of soap opera actors who can say that. And have experienced that. And I'm sure we all kind of experience it in a different way, but really it comes down to trust. I think is the word I'm thinking of. You get to a point where you really trust each other so much that when that red light goes on, you really believe the story and you want to tell the story. I always tell people I'm a storyteller. That's what I do. I tell stories through the characters I play, through the words I say, and through the lyrics I sing. I tell stories. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm interested in. And I think Kim and I both were interested in telling the story of Josh and Reva. As much as it shifted and changed over the decades, years and decades that they ran that story, we both wanted to tell the story, and we both trusted that the other person would sort of hold up their end of that bargain, that we would work together to tell this story, and we did. And she's a force to be reckoned with. She's one of the great actresses, I think, of certainly in daytime and anywhere, really. I think she's one of the great actresses of our time. Occasionally we work together on stage now, and it's fun. It's always fun.
Well, Robert, I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time and for sharing so many heartfelt memories. I really enjoyed listening to your thoughts on the craft of acting and what portraying a character means to you, whether it's in front of a camera or being on stage. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Not only am I honored, but I just enjoyed every moment speaking with you, and I certainly hope I get to see you on the stage someday.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Hi, this is Carrie Mitchum. Hollywood and Beyond podcast is produced, edited, and hosted by Stephen Brittingham. See you on another episode of Hollywood and Beyond. Thanks for listening.